Hi everyone, Marco and Code here for a 56th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today we're going to the Victory era in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video we're going to explore all the variants of Zaskar biker battleship, how much they differ from the regular model, when did they appeared, and extract every bit of mechanical knowledge we have on them so far. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Adrastea-class? A large-wheel battleship developed by the Ballistic Equipment and Space Patrol Armory, the Adrastea was a limited production all-terrain vessel deployed by the Zaskar Empire in the final stages of the Zaskar War. Named after one of the moons orbiting Jupiter, herself named after the goddess of inescapable punishment and pressing necessity, the Adrastea was an incredibly unorthodox yet very advanced naval design, being specially commissioned for Zaskar newest release force, the Motorrad Squadron, to be used as their new tactical asset for the incoming Earth cleansing operation, Operation Roller. First of all, the Adrastea was designed as a large common flagship, featuring a total length of 426 meters, thus making it smaller but still comparable in size to enemy Rakylum-class battleships. Such large proportions often adopted to install massive internal hangars, ramps and catapults, designed to support and field large complements of mobile suits, was instead allocated for a different purpose in the Adrastea, with the ship completely ditching this traditionally adopted design doctrine to instead innovate with its own. Indeed, the Adrastea actually instead adopted a fully encased storage-type hangar, coupled with a dedicated launch bay located underneath, enabling a complement of around 16 mobile suits out of an unknown number stored in the hangar to be descended to the bay through two vertical elevators. This internal hangar, while lacking any kind of launching catapults whatsoever, however still included front and side opening hatches, enabling the Adrastea mobile suit forces to exit the ship from all directions and support the mother ship if need be. This design choice, although seemingly very problematic as it left the ship without the possibility to launch mobile suits at high speed to serve as interceptors, was however fully compensated by the battle philosophy and synergy between the Adrastea and the mobile suits it was supposed to fight alongside, Zaskar's third generation models, with the complement of Einrad-equipped suits like the Gedlav or Burbank, always patrolling and rolling around the Adrastea mothership. Thanks to their Einrads, these suits could just jump out of the opening hatches and quickly reach the high acceleration required for interception, fully negating the need for launching ramps and catapults. This emancipation from catapults and ramps thus helped the Adrastea to better take advantage of its massive size without needing to compromise around their presence, enabling the ship to mount a terrifying arsenal and grant it a firepower enough to resurrect the Big Gun Doctrine days on its own. As primary weapons, the Adrastea-class featured a total of 16 powerful beam cannons, 4 hyper-output double-barrel turrets placed on its wheels, 4 smaller high-output double-barrel cannons, 2 on its fronts, and 2 protecting the rear. This imposing arsenal of beam cannons was also supplemented by 3 additional secondary turrets, a triple-barrel beam cannon protecting the front of its bridge, and 2 smaller beam turrets protecting its blind spots. This massive firepower was of course complemented by many defensive armaments, including a pair of anti-ship missile launchers, but most notably a total of 35 single-barrel rapid-firing beam cannons, giving the Adrastea massive beam-based anti-air abilities and excellent defensive capacities for its bridge as a result. Speaking about bridges, the Adrastea also came with the ability to retract its own during combat. An ice on the cake, the ship also mounted a standard Zaskar-style curved beam shield on its bow, granting it exceptional defensive abilities even outside of its anti-air firepower. Now, the most famous and most ridiculous feature of the Adrastea was, however, none of its trinkets, neither firepower, neither innovative hangar design, with that place being reserved to the Adrastea ridiculous motorcycle features, its set of 2 massive bike-type wheels. A set of massive Einrad-related wheels, each of around 50 meters of radius, the Adrastea wheels were the byproduct of the advent of the 3rd generation of Zaskar suits, bulldozing super weapons designed as the centerpieces of Operation Roller and meant to crush everything in the Motorrad Squadron path, leveling the ground for Zaskar Earth cleansing operation. These massive crushing wheels were actually not just offensive flattening weapons, with this wheel system enabling the Adrastea to drastically expand its environmental range, giving the ship the ability to roam the ground, like a land battleship, but the lunar surface or even the ocean see-through as well, thus turning it into a potential submarine base or a lunar roamer if need be. Ice on the cake, the tires of those wheels were made of a dementedly resistant material, capable of tanking effortlessly beam attacks on explosives alike, and well, pretty much anything short of a small nuclear explosion, in which could, even in such scenario, be easily purged to swap the crippled wheel for a different replacement one. When not used to cause flattening destruction on the ground, the Adrastea's wheels could also split open and fold on their sides, enabling the ship to fully reveal a pair of Minovsky craft systems, turning the Adrastea into its proper signature flight form, thus enabling the ship to float indefinitely in the atmosphere and roam the skies. In such configuration, the Adrastea could also move around in other environments, such as space or deep under oceans, thus making the ship also capable of acting as a fully fledged submarine base or a space battleship, an outstanding versatility for such a weird design. Unfortunately, the Adrastea was also a ship with its own share of issues as fitting for such an unorthodox design. First of all, it doesn't seem the Adrastea was able to turn its wheels at all, thus forcing it to either lean and perform long detours to change course, or rely on its Minovsky craft to fully rotate its position, something which hasn't been made clear since the Adrastea first depictions and would in either case severely hinder its mobility. This first visible flaw was also coupled with another design issue, with the Adrastea overpowered arsenal on fancy features, resulting in a very poor cruising range and operationality, forcing the class to resupply way more often than standard battleships to keep all its systems and weapons functional. Last but not least, the flying form of the Adrastea was also a heavy compromise, providing it with better rotation axis for its main cannons, but at the cost of lower defensive abilities, with the now exposed Minovsky craft coupled with the ship having fewer defenses on its underhull, making it very vulnerable from attacks coming from below. Final design flaw for the Adrastea, the novative launching bay coming with its front and side hatches could only use both hatches while in flying mode or with its engine stopped, severely reducing the Adrastea capacity to deploy and recover mobile suits when roaming in its bike form. In terms of production, it is unknown how many Adrasteas were produced by the Zaskar Empire, with a total of 4 ships being seen in the lore, a first version owned by the Golden X Squadron, and 3 ships assigned to the Motorrad fleet, the named ship Adrastea, the Rasteo, and a third unnamed tanker ship we will later cover. The most infamous ships of the class, those of the Motorrad fleet, would end up starting their deployment history around late May UC-153, descending on Earth before causing unparalleled damage through their flattening efforts as part of Operation Roller, a mass destruction campaign unleashed by Zaskar to cause as much damage to the North American continent and purify Earth before the descent of their queen, Maria Pure Ammonia. Thanks to the combined efforts of the Federation forces and the Ligue Militaire, the Adrastea's terror campaign would be eventually halted, the remains of the Motorrad squadron being soon forced to stand down as part of the Zaskar Federation ceasefire, and later depart from the planet altogether. Both Adrastea and Rasteo would later be reassigned to the defense of the super weapon Angel Halo, but would be eventually sunk as part of the Ligue Militaire's counter-offensive against the Psychomo fortress. With the destruction of these two most prominent and last ships of the line, the Adrastea-class finally ceased to exist, which coupled with Zaskar's subsequent fall soon after the battle, ended up burying the design, making it one of the most ambitious ships to date, and one of the last new modern ships to emerge in the Universal Century, right before the dark days of the age of the space warring state. But that's enough setting for today, let's get to our variants. Let's first start with a very obscure and frankly quite minor variation of the Adrastea-class, a ship you would have unironically never discovered without this channel, a call forward the supply version of the Adrastea, the Adrastea tanker. An unarmed version of the regular Adrastea, stripped down of the totality of its offensive weapons save from its signature wheels, the Adrastea tanker was one of the 2 creations Zaskar High Command had commissioned to ensure Operation Rollers ran smoothly, and to take care of the chain of supply that the 2 deployed fully armed Adrasteas and their escort Lysithea-class would inevitably require during their campaign on Earth. The first of those two creations was the massive spaceship called the Marilyn, a large dock ship similar to the Lysithea-class, capable of fully hosting an Adrastea in its belly and fully resupplying it right at the middle of its journey between the Zaskar homeland and its final destination on Earth. After this first step over at the Marilyn, the Motorrad squadron would then descend on Earth to finally engage Operation Roller, where the Adrasteas would unleash their arsenal on the earthly population, but also rapidly require resupplies and repairs to keep rolling without being grounded due to a lack of mobile suit or ship spare parts or an exhausted payload. To address this issue, Zaskar High Command introduced an additional Adrastea model to serve the Motorrad squadron, a courier ship with no combat capabilities, meant to arrive mid-operation to replenish the others, then head back to the Zaskar homeland, the Adrastea tanker. Now we know the Adrastea tanker isn't a separate class from the regular Adrastea, with sources specifying the tanker was created by modifying an existing Adrastea, removing all of its absolute payload to save space, and use that space to instead pack more supplies to bring to its sister ships. According to the same sources, it is hinted that there may have been more than one Adrastea tanker, perhaps as many as 2 or 3, although only one was ever shown in the Victory series, briefly appearing at the start of episode 36, returning to the Zaskar homeland, while the Motorrad's fleet is still sleeping after shipping up the nameship Adrastea with gifts and supplies. Aside this, not much else is known about the tanker, the ship design being only ever showed in Mobile Suit Victory Gundam mechanical files and provided with a very short and concise backstory. Time to move out to a smaller but way more substantial variation. When it comes to UC land battleships, there is always some sort of story with a scaled down or scaled up variant. The Victory has the mini tray, the Doubday has the big Doubday for example. The Adrastea, this pesky motorcycle land battleship, doesn't make an exception, with the Wheel Terror also coming and operating with its own small cousin variation. I'm naming the less covered but still infamous Lysithea-class. A motorcycle type landing cruiser designed as a smaller version of the Adrastea, the Lysithea was also a ship named after one of Jupiter's moon, being specially commissioned to operate with the Adrasteas as part of the Motorrad squadron, acting as escorts and mobile suit destroyers for their bigger counterparts. With a total length of 227 meters, the Lysithea followed the same basic principles of the new design doctrine pioneered by the Adrastea, introducing a similar but smaller hangar deploying bay, with no catapults and fewer arches, flattening towers coupled with a flight mode, and of course the same vulnerabilities from underside attacks due to the lack of firepower underneath. Speaking of firepower, the Lysithea, while paling in comparison with the Adrastea-class, still boasted a terrifying firepower for a cruiser of such small dimensions, introducing a pair of double-barrel large megaparticle cannons for primary fire, one protecting its front and one protecting the back of its bridge. For secondary fire and anti-air defenses, the Lysithea also mounted a total of 12 medium-sized double-barrel beam cannons, 4 on its tires, 6 protecting its sides, 1 at the very front, and 1 under the tip of its bow. In terms of missile volleys capabilities, the Lysithea instead phased out the inbuilt launchers of the Adrastea in favor of externally mounted alternatives, introducing a pair of 6 tubes missile pods mounted on each of its sides under the bridge. With this overall arsenal far exceeding the ones featured in the opposing side light cruisers such as the Salami Sky or Klopp, the Lysithea thus appeared as one of the deadliest small vessels in the entire Universal Century, while also retaining the amazing environmental range of the Adrastea due to its similar wheel and flight mode systems. Now, while the Lysithea was, as we said, less armed and smaller than the Adrastea, it still had some advantages over the larger and thus more sluggish vessels, the Lysithea being way more maneuverable than its counterparts, enabling it to act as a vanguard or more mobile scout for the rest of the Motorrad fleet without sacrificing any of its autonomy. This is best emphasized in episode 37 and 38 of Victory Gundam, where Duker Eek Lysithea was shown to be able to conduct autonomous operations far outside the perimeter secured by the Motorrad fleet, and chase, then dogfight, the protagonist on board the White Ark, a light cruiser almost 8 times smaller than the Lysithea. In terms of production, it is unknown how many Lysitheas were produced by the Zaskar Empire, although a minimum of 9 ships were seen in the Motorrad squadron hands, with 3 appearing during Operation Roller, 2 escorting the Rasteo, and one assisting the nameship Adrastea, and one crashing into Yuzo's mother, but that's a secret.
Anyway,
Of those Lysitheas, 2 would be destroyed during the Earth campaign, with 1 retreating in space with the Rastio and Adrastea, and joining 5 additional Lysitheas to form the first line of defense for the Angel Halo. After a skirmish with the Ligue Militaire, 1 of those 6 Lysitheas would be destroyed, with the V2 and Lupsino Brubank dogfighting each other around its carcass. By the final episode of Victory Gundam, the Adrastea would make its last stand with a total of 6 escorting Lysitheas, before being rammed by the exploding Red Force Jr., likely destroying the last batch of Lysitheas as well. At the time of the age of the warring space states that unfolded by the end of the UC-150s well into the UC-170s, some Lysithea parts would survive here and there across the Earth sphere, with one of such parts, an entire Lysithea wheel, being recovered and introduced in the design of the Escargot, the company vessel of Mighty Transport, the protagonist organization of Crossbone Dust. The Escargot would however modify the internals of the recovered Lysithea wheel, adjusting it to serve as a cargo bay to store supplies, but also transport the various mobile suits the company possessed, most notably the Gremlin-esque Gedlav the Right Chaps and their star suit, the mixed-build Anchor. And with this, the last remain of a Lysithea-class was somehow able to be redeemed, becoming an essential piece of a protagonist vessel nearly 15 years after its introduction. Now, before we end this video, I just want to address as to why the Adrastea, a monstrous motorcycle and overly armed battleship, was ever included in the UC franchise through Victory. In lore, the Adrastea shape is explained as it having been designed by Juker Ik, a Zalskor senior officer and a passionate biker who was already involved in the design of similar wheel designs such as the Mobile Armor Galaxon and the 2 variations of the Zalskor attack bikes. Upon returning to Zalskor after the first arc of the series, Juker would then convince Zalskor Prime Minister, von Skagati, to greenlit Operation Roller and thus approve the construction of the Adrastea's and Lysithea's designs. Outlaw, the Adrastea is the sad result of the newly merged Sunrise and Bandai pressuring and shaking Tomino into incorporating into the series a very visually striking battleship that could evoke the infamous space battleship Yamato and thus be made a toy for all the Japanese children to buy. Out of desperation, Tomino then proposed the idea of a ridiculous motorcycle ship, which was to his horror greenlit by the executives and thrown into the series, while he was expecting the idea to be simply brushed aside as completely ridiculous. This is the same reason why so many plastic toys were made in the 90s for the Victory series. Bandai and Sunrise were really trying to use the new media as a cash cow. And with that sad story, this video comes to an end. Marcon quotes out.
But who will survive?